Hey guys, welcome back to the channel. So in today's episode, I've got a full care guide for the Tradescantia houseplant. So I'm going to cover everything you need to know, including light, water, humidity and pests, so that you can avoid some of the mistakes that I have made with this houseplant in the past. So Tradescantias are a really popular plant and there's loads of different types of varieties. There's this, probably the most popular one, Tradescantia zebrina. There's this tricolour. What else have we got? This purple pallida, very nice plant. And is there another one? There's a Tiana here as well. Really nice striped leaves on that one. And then I've also got the Nanook. So that's 5 or 6 types of Tradescantias that I have, but there are lots more out there for you to buy. So lots of choice. Tradescantias are pretty easy to care for really, but it's just a few basic principles that we need to know to make sure we have a happy and healthy plant. So you might have noticed that the stems on your Tradescantia are beginning to die back at the base of the plant. So that's what's happening to this Tradescantia tricolour of mine. You'll notice at the base of the plant that some of the stems are dying back and some of the leaves are dying. So I'm going to cover why that happens to your Tradescantia and what we can do about it. So we begin, as always, with light. So Tradescantias live on the forest floor of the tropical rainforest. That's their natural habitat. So they get lots of dappled sun throughout the day, covered by the surrounding trees around them. So they kind of grow on the floor of the forest. So that means we need to replicate that as far as possible in our homes. So we need to put them in a position in our homes that gets lots of bright indirect lights and out of direct sunlight as well. An ideal spot for your Tradescantia would be near your east or west facing window, so it gets lots of bright indirect light. I wouldn't put it on a south facing windowsill because that's going to be too much direct light for the plant and it's going to dry the plant out basically, and some of the stems are going to start to die back. Tradescantias can tolerate a bit of shade. I wouldn't put them in a north facing position though, won't be enough light for them. If you do that, then some of the leaves are going to start to lose their vibrancy, they're going to start to fade, and you won't have a nice looking plant. So I keep my Tradescantias on either my east or west facing window, near my east or west facing window. So on my east side, my Tradescantias tend to get about 3 or 4 hours of direct sun every morning, which is quite good for a Tradescantia. You don't want them to have kind of the harsh afternoon sun that tends to scorch the leaves a little bit and the plant dries out, but a few hours of morning sun is fine for this plant. But like I said, just keep it out of a south facing position where it's going to get direct sun for the majority of the day. With regards to watering, I found that my Tradescantias tend to be a little bit thirstier than my other houseplants. And I think that's because they are really fast growers. They tend to push out lots of new growth, especially in the growing season, spring, summer and autumn. But they even grow in the winter as well. And they put out lots of new stems, lots of new leaves, and root development is really quick as well. You'll notice that if you've started to propagate your Tradescantias, that quick growth tends to mean that the plant is a little bit thirstier than your other slow growing houseplants. So I tend to water my Tradescantias at least once a week, maybe even twice a week during the summer. I let the soil of the plant dry out in between waterings, just so that the plant's not got soggy soil for the roots. That'll tend to lead to root rot. If I water less than once a week during the growing season, then the plant tends to look a little bit shabby, the leaves tend to die back a little bit, and the stems as well kind of speeds that process up a little bit. So I make sure that I water at least once a week. During the winter, I'll cut that back to once every 2 weeks. It still needs watering because it is, like I say, a thirsty plant, but I do cut that back during the winter. So to help with my watering, I have this trusty moisture meter. So I stick this in the soil and this tells me exactly how moist or how dry the soil of the plant is, and I found that to be a real lifesaver. I'll only water my Tradescantia when it reads 1 or 2, so it's on the dry side of the plant. If your plant is moist, if my plant is moist, then I won't water it. I'll leave it a few days and then measure it again. So this has proven to be a real lifesaver because sometimes it's quite difficult to know when your plants have got dry soil. You have to go quite deep with your finger, and this is just much easier just to stick it in. So I bought this on Amazon. I'll put a link to that in the description so you can check that out if you want to, guys. One thing to be careful when watering your houseplants, and it's one of the reasons why I bottom water my houseplants on the whole, That is, Tradescantias don't tend to like water droplets going on the leaves. It tends to lead to a little bit of discoloration, a bit of rot on the leaves. So you can see an example there on my Tradescantia Nanook, where I've got some water on the leaves. It led to some damage. There's another example there. Hopefully you can see that just on there. So whenever I get water droplets on this plant, it tends to damage the leaves a little bit. So you just want to avoid that as much as possible. And one way of doing that is to bottom water your houseplants. I've got a video on why I bottom water my houseplants versus top watering. I'll link to that in the description. Tradescantias aren't fussy at all about temperature. My Tradescantias do fine during the summer and the winter. Doesn't really matter what temperature the house is. Tradescantias are also fine in general humidity in your house. They don't tend to be fussy in that regards. They'll do fine in a dry or humid environment, just depending on what the humidity level in your house is. The only thing with humidity is just not to let the water droplets drop on the leaves, as I mentioned before. Other than that, really not fussy with regards to humidity, so you're fine to have the central heating on in your house during the winter. If you're finding this video useful so far, guys, then please give it a thumbs up. That'd be really great. Tradescantias need a really well-draining soil to avoid the risk of overwatering them. So I keep my Tradescantias, like I do with most of my houseplants, in a well-draining mix that I make myself, so that it has about 70% compost, 30% perlite. Perlite's a really great product for your houseplants. It really lightens the soil. It's like a volcanic rock that's been formulated that we can put into our houseplants. So the perlite I use, I'll link to that in the description. You can buy that from Amazon. Don't put your Tradescantia in just compost, or any other houseplant for that matter, because compost on its own is going to be too dense for the roots of your plant, and it's not going to thrive in that condition. It's going to put out slower growth and the leaves won't be as vibrant, because the compost tends to choke out the roots of the plant a little bit as it gets more and more dense over time. I use a balanced fertilizer for my Tradescantias, like I do with most of my other house plants. So I use Miracle Grow water-soluble fertilizer. So I make sure that I dilute the mixture that is suitable for houseplants, because the dilution for houseplants is different to outdoor plants. You can do both, but you just want to check the dilution, make sure you're not over-fertilizing your plants. So I fertilize my plants during the growing season only, so that's only during spring and summer really. I don't really fertilize in the autumn, and I definitely don't fertilize in the winter. And that's just because the plant's not growing in the winter, it's not actively growing, so it doesn't need the nutrients to grow. Make sure that you do fertilize during the growing season. I fertilize once a month generally. And this just makes sure that the plant continues to push out new growth, make sure it has the nutrients in the soil for it to continue grow, and it really makes the leaves really vibrant and really pop, so you have a much healthier looking plant. So Tradescantias are fast growers, and the roots really do develop very quickly on a Tradescantia, so it's a good idea just to check that the plant, whether it needs repotting, probably once a year, maybe twice a year, once every 6 months. You'll notice that Tradescantias probably need uppotting more than your other houseplants, because they are such quick growers, as I mentioned before. When you take the plant out of its nursery pot to check the roots, whether it is root bound, and you just want to make sure that the plant's roots are not circling around the pot, particularly at the top of the plant where the crown is. If it's circling around at the top, then that has a tendency to choke the crown of the plant, and that's not going to be healthy. If it is doing that, then you just want to untangle that and pot it up into a bigger size pot with some fresh compost perlite mix. So I've got a couple of videos on me repotting a couple of plants. I'll link to those in the description. The Tradescantia is probably, without doubt, the easiest plant to propagate. So easy. That's because it's such a quick grower. If you take a cutting from a plant, you'll get roots on the stems within probably a week, especially in the spring and summer. So it really is easy to propagate. I've done a video on how to propagate this Tradescantia teddy bear vine. I'll link to that in the description. And I've also got a video on how to propagate this guy, the tricolour. Again, I'll link to that in the description, so watch those videos after this to get full details of how to propagate a Tradescantia. You really see that it really is that easy. You might notice on your Tradescantia, as I said earlier, that the leaves or the stems of your plant are beginning to die back at the base of the plant, which is what is happening to this Tradescantia tricolour. The stems at the base of the plant, the leaves are crisping up and dying off. That, unfortunately, is an unavoidable fact about this plant, and it's all to do with how the plant grows in the wild. So in the wild, as I said earlier, the Tradescantia is a creeping kind of vining plant, and it creeps along the floor of the tropical rainforest. So it has these really long stems that kind of spreads almost like a weed, and then along each of the stems, as it grows longer and longer, where the leaf nodes are on the stem, when it touches the floor of the forest floor, it will send out roots, and it will attach itself at each point, at each leaf node, to the forest floor, thereby strengthening that stem. So as it goes longer and longer and longer, it gets more and more roots at its various points along the way, and it grows stronger and stronger, and it doesn't die back. Whereas in our homes, we will tend to have the plant draping over the pot, like this. And obviously these long stems are just gonna hang down, and they don't have anything to touch onto. They don't have the forest floor to touch onto. So no roots are developing from these leaf nodes, essentially. So that means that the stems on this plant over time naturally get weaker. The closer it is to the base of the plant, the weaker it is, and that's where the leaves start to die back. So that's something you can't really avoid with Tradescantias that are particularly trailing. It's just obviously growing in a completely different environment to how they grow in the wild. So the way that we combat this, and the easiest way to do this, is basically to propagate the plant. So all we need to do, before the stems get too long, we just need to snip them off at the base, propagate them by just putting them back into the pot, and then the stem will regrow, and it'll just keep recycling that way. Another way to do it is just to take the stems off and to have another plant, basically. Just keep multiplying the number of plants, and you won't mind having to chuck away the mother plant because you've got the backups that you've been propagating. Fortunately, I've not got any pest problems with my Tradescantias, none that I know about anyway. They can be susceptible to the usual things such as spider mites, thrips, mealybugs, and fungus gnats in the soil. You just want to check the underside of the leaves, just check for things like spider mites. You want to check for webbing. Just make sure there's no webbing in there where the spider mites will be hiding. If you do have a problem with that, you just want to take it outside and give it a good spray off. Get rid of the spider mites and change the soil as well. If you've got fungus gnats in the soil, then you'll notice these kind of black flies buzzing around the soil. If that's the case, then check out my how to get rid of fungus gnats video. I'll link to that in the description. So Tradescantias are a really beautiful plant and well worth having a few in your house. They come in all shapes and sizes and all different colours. As you can see, I've got purple ones such as this Nanook, got this green one, the teddy bear vine, and the classic Zebrina. So they are a fantastic plant, really easy to grow, really easy to propagate. The only issue is the dieback of the stems. That's pretty unavoidable really, the way it grows in our homes. So you just want to keep propagating to kind of combat that problem. So if you follow these care tips about watering, light, etc., then you'll have a really happy Tradescantia in your house with vibrant leaves. If you found the video useful, if you enjoyed it, then please do give it a thumbs up, really helps the channel grow. If you're new to the channel, then please consider subscribing if you like content like this. I want to be notified when future videos come out. Let me know in the comments if you have found the problem of the stems dying back on your Tradescantia. I'd be really interested to know what you've done about that. Let me know if you have any Tradescantias in your collection that I don't have. I'm always interested in growing the number of Tradescantias in my house. And for your next video, why not check out that one, and I will see you there. Thank you very much for watching.